And the environment is really key. We have a natural tendency to not pay attention too much to our environment. However, our environment is the invisible hand that shapes our behavior and ultimately our life. We cannot dissociate ourselves from the environment. There's a false debate that is being going on in biology for years and years and decades, which is nature versus nurture, which one is correct. And the truth is no one is correct. It's the combination of both that are ultimately what happens. And so we can't dissociate ourselves from the environment. And so how we react or respond to an environment is really key in order to help us live by design. We need to become aware of who we are, but we need to also become aware of how we interact with our external environment. And there's many ways to think about it, but the simplest way I can think about it is to look back to the Stoic philosophy about the circle of concern and the circle of influence. That's the easiest way to depict it. And so I'm just going to briefly re-explain the two: circle of concern and circle of influence. So here we have the circle of concern. The circle of concern is all the things we pay attention to, the things that we get worried about, the things that we think we need to do something about it. But very often we have very little power to influence. And so these are all the things that are happening in the world, but we have very little personal power to influence. And so if we get trapped into our circle of concern and we have a very small circle of influence is basically three things. We can only change three things: our perception, our decisions, and our actions. This is our circle of influence. But if we spend our day getting consumed in our circle of concern by all the things that goes around that we can't do anything about it, ultimately we feel hopeless and helpless. And that's not very good for ourselves. That's not very good for our confidence. That's not very good for our sense of meaning and purpose. And as Marcia said at the beginning, that's not very good for our immune system either, because we cannot depress our immune system. We feel worthless. So putting too much focus and attention onto our circle of concern and having a very small circle of influence is not going to get us anywhere, and it's definitely not going to help us live by design. This is more going to be live by default. Now we have the opposite side. If we have a very little circle of concern and a very big circle of influence, so that means if we are a very big circle of influence, is we focus on what we think, what we decide, and what we can do. But because we have a very little circle of influence, that means we don't care about anything else about ourselves. We become very narcissistic. That's not getting us to live by design and make contribution either, because basically it doesn't mean we don't care about the rest of the people. We don't care about the world. So here we're absolutely self-centered. Here we become absolutely altruistic. And none of them are sustainable in order to achieve a fulfilling and meaningful life and make our contribution. So what we want to do is we want to have a circle of concern that is a little bit bigger than our circle of influence. And we want to continue to grow that circle of concern, and that's going to create tension for us in order to grow our circle of influence. And that's a healthy tension, because that healthy tension, it creates personal growth, it creates professional growth. And we want to maintain a tight relationship between our circle of concern and our circle of influence. We don't want them to get too far apart. Otherwise, we end up on either extreme, which is not sustainable. We want to make sure we grow them together simultaneously. Our circle of concern puts tension and pressure to increase our circle of influence. As we grow our circle of influence and it gets close to our circle of concern, we grow our circle of concern a bit more, and we continue, and so on. And so ultimately, we end up growing two circles, the circle of concern and the circle of influence. And that's what creates more meaning, fulfillment, and success in our life. So that's a very simple way to describe how we can interact with our environment and what we need to pay attention. That also describes the relationship between ourselves and other people. It's always maintaining that balance between self and others. The first circle here, a huge circle of concern and small circle of influence. Everything is focused on other people. At some point, we're going to feel that we're sacrificing ourselves. When we have a huge circle of influence and a very small circle of concern, we just focus on ourselves. We cannot distance ourselves from other people. We're going to feel ultimately isolated and disconnected. It's not going to work either. The optimal solution is to grow the two circles to maintain that balance between self and others, and continue that to grow that interaction and influence between self and others. So how can we do that? Well, there's a few different ways we can think about it. First is we want to make space and time for what we want to experience more of in life. So if you want to experience more of certain aspect of life, you want to make sure that there is space and time in your life currently, or you're going to design consciously space and times to be able to experience more of what you want. Sometimes we need to let go of things and people that do not serve us anymore. It's about cutting the ties to physical things that we don't need anymore and letting go on their journey. Sometimes it's about cutting the tie with some people that don't resonate with us anymore at what level we are. And we just need to let go and go on their journey so we can open the time and space for new people to come in that are going to be more supportive or more conducive or where we want to go in our own journey. And the third aspect is also about surrounding ourselves with the resource we need to achieve our goal. Resource includes knowledge, includes physical resource, material resources, includes financial resources, includes people, network. And so these are the three key points that we can play between our circle of concern and our circle of influence to maintain that tight relationship. Makes more space and time for what we want to experience. Let go of the things that do not serve us anymore and that we don't need anymore. And then surround ourselves with the resources that are going to help us achieve our goals. So here are three questions for you to look around your life currently to play around this concept of the circle of influence and circle of concern. The first question is, how can you optimize your environment to live by design? This is about focusing a bit more on your environment and what can you do right now to start to optimize it a bit more in order to live by design and achieve the success and the goals that you want. The second question is, what can you bring in your environment that is going to ultimately help you move towards what you want to achieve, living by design, having more success, fulfillment, empowerment, and impact? And then the opposite question would be, what can you remove from your current environment that is not conducive for you to move towards where you want to go?